Village Regulations and Open Meetings Act. Technically, Barbara is not here right now, so I have to call the meeting to order as the Deputy Village Clerk, calling the Finance Committee, and I will call the roll of those physically present. So, Member Rappin. Here. Member Ryder.
Here.
Okay, in the absence of, unless anybody wants to make a motion not to include Trustee and Chair Ankerman, she'll be included and considered present during the meeting. She'll actually run the meeting. And if there's not a motion to do so, then her attendance will be considered present for the meeting. All right, you're good to go, Chair Ankerman.
Okay, thank you. I'm pulling up my agenda, trying to get all organized before we start here.
Okay. I was getting a little bit of echo.
That was me.
Oh,
I muted myself.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
So can you hear me okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. And it'll take me just a moment. I'm going to pull up that Finance Committee agenda.
Drew, is this recorded?
It is. We are recorded.
Okay, are we live as well?
We are live here as well as on anybody watching on the website or on television.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get this riveting television started. Good evening and welcome to the Village of Lake Bluff's Finance Committee meeting. This is Monday, October 24th, 2022. We have not or have we, has that officially been attendance?
Number one is done. Yes.
Okay, got it. So we've done our call to order. The first item of business is approval of the minutes from the last meeting, which was September 26, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And
Thank you.
there were two typos there. We had erroneously included Trustee Markey as a member of the Finance Committee. So, wrong title, right person.
That's right. Great
So-
input. Any further corrections or updates to the minutes? Hearing none, all approval, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next on the agenda is any non-agenda items or visitors that we have. If there's anyone who would like at this time to address the Finance Committee on anything that's not listed on the agenda, this is the time to do so.
No one present at Village Hall.
And nobody online.
That is correct.
Great. Okay, next to our order of business for discussion. I would like to take a little bit out of order on the agenda item 4B first, a discussion regarding the 2022 property tax levy estimates, because that is something that we absolutely have to get done this evening. So, Bettina, thank you so much for the detailed presentation that you gave for the committee to take a look at. I don't know if you would like to kind of walk through some of the overall calculations for the benefit of the listening audience and the committee members, to kind of just highlight some of the unusual circumstances that we've run across in the estimation of this year's property tax levy.
Sure. Okay. So
And can I see the screen too, or no?
I haven't put anything up yet on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Once I share, you'll see it. Did you
Okay.
want me to share that sheet that has, okay,
The most recent one, the
okay,
one you emailed out.
right.
That's all right.
I need a Zoom lesson again. Can you see that okay, Barbara?
Oh, that's great. I was trying to pull it up on my phone so I could kind of do it that way, but that's fantastic.
Okay, so before I go to the sheet real quick, I'll just give a quick summary. So CPI came in at 7% and the PTEL max is 5%. So all the calculations for the tax levy are based off of that, since we, even though we're home rule, still adhere to the CPI max of 5%. So the packet included some scenarios and also a detailed version that takes us from 0% all the way to the 5% assumed rate. The typical with CPI, a reduced CPI column of 3% and no CPI, and then a freeze. And of particular note is, since we've reached the 5% cap, the library being a component unit, I'm not sure where they're at in their request yet. I've spoken to them. We should know within a week or so. They may or may not follow along with our suggestions. If they choose to take the full 5%, then that would come out of our existing levy, because we file as one unit. So it could reduce the dollars that we take in or not. So this sheet that's on the screen actually portrays the increases from 0% to 5%, showing the net change to the general fund, including the library moving along with us in those decreases or increases, and then one version of the library remaining at their 5% cap. This year's actuarial report from the police pension fund came in at $1,095,000 and some change for a request for contribution for the year, which is higher than last year's $927,685. That's largely attributed to investment losses and also a change to some actuarial tables, payroll numbers, percentages used that were included in the packet. One would anticipate that next year that number would increase even more due to investment losses. Mid-year, we're already seeing, $300,000 to $400,000 in losses, and I'm not sure that we'll rebound that number. We'll see. So that's the main factor in how that's calculated. So back to this sheet, it gives a really quick summary of where we're at and the estimated impact for median home values at $671,000. Line 16 shows the dollar value of increase for the village portion of the levy at each of those incremental numbers for you to look at and discuss and decide upon. And does anyone have any specific questions?
Bettina, do you have much of a sense of a history of the board recommending the full CPI over time? Is that, 90% of the time, 80% of the time, or pretty much all the time?
So to be honest, it depends on what the CPI number has historically been. If, for example, last year it was 1.4 and it was they took it. In years past, it's been higher and we've chosen not to take it, and the whole thing's been frozen even at EVA level, and requested the same number as last year. Historically, I would say no, they have not taken the full CPI number, right?
It's come closer. I would say, it depends. Recently, the last 5 years, I say before that, it's historically been CPI. And for the longest time, up until there was 1 year, probably 20 years that the village didn't do it, then it's only been during the COVID period that has there been a lot more hand-wringing and review of that number, even though at the end of the day, the amount of revenue captured by that is not, it's a real number, but it's not enormous. It's not the shifts that we're seeing in the sales tax, right?
Right. You can look at the chart that was included in the packet. I think it's the second page of the memo. It lists what the CPI numbers have been under the four supposed scenarios versions. You can see that we've ranged anywhere from 0.1% all the way up to 3%, depending on the year.
I have a question. I want to make sure that I'm reading that chart correctly. This is that chart.
Yep.
If I look the last column, the CPI at 5%, this is a 5% increment basically, and I see pretty much the last line that is estimating impact on median home. If we were to adopt a CPI at 5%, the estimated impact on median home of $671,000 would be an additional $55 a year. That's what we're saying.
Right, for the village portion of the property
For
tax.
the village portion, what would be the total? So the village portion is basically a third, right, somewhere there?
Right, but so there's other components to that tax, being the park district and school districts and
Yes, of
and other.
course.
So those components, I don't know. But
Absolutely.
just for our own, it would be about $55.
Okay, thank you.
We don't know what the increases are going to be for those components yet, right?
I've spoken to them and gotten a sense of where they're at. nothing is official. I've heard numbers from 3.5% up to 5%, but nothing less than 3%.
And Bettina, do you have a sense of if we took the full 5%, which is what CPI is, and it affected the average resident by $55 a year, what percentage of that would be for the pension, for the police pension? Do you have any sense of that? Because one thing that I was mentioning to Drew earlier is obviously in downtimes in the market, that account goes down substantially, but typically it will recover at some point over the next few years. So I
Right.
don't want to overshoot how much we need to fund that, knowing it will come back.
So with the total extension at 5% of 4.7 million approximately, and the police pension levy at 1.09, so you're looking at, 25 to 30% of it is police pension.
Okay.
I think one thing to think about with just the CPI number being as high as it is, we're looking at the impact of how much our property tax will, be affected by that. We can kind of pull the lever to a certain extent, but the thing that we cannot control is the expenses that we then as a village have to pay for, the contractual services and other things that we have to purchase so that we can provide the services to our residents. And so we can be sure that those costs are going to be going up, and probably that CPI factor being a good indicator. And so whether or not we take that increment in CPI, and our property tax is about a third of what comes in for us to use to, pay for all these village services. We know that many of these village services are going to be going up commensurate with something along CPI. So that's element, is that when we're in that budgeting process for everything that we have to do, either we have to pay that, 7% more, or we have fewer services, fewer, streets are repaved, work is delayed if we don't have funding for it. So that's just one thing to think about. We're looking at 1/3 of what comes in and how much we're going to, move the levy. And we have to think about all the stuff that goes out to obtain the services and, capital improvements that we need to do for the village, all of those being adversely affected by the CPI as well. And all of that is to say, we need to be cognizant that what we're doing is not just saying, oh, how much is our property tax going to be and how much does this impact our residents, but how is that going to impact how we then have the ability to give the services and make the improvements that we need to make. Does that make sense?
Does. I have a question about the impact of the library. If I'm looking at the chart that's attachment E to the packet, and the bottom chart assumes that the library takes the PTL or PTL cap, the 5%, and then charts how much we would have left over, essentially the net revenue change, were we to take any of the 0 through 5% increases. And so it's, I guess, very significant if we were to take 0, right? That would not only be that they would be requesting 5% and we were requesting 0, but the net revenue change to us in that scenario is $218,000. And so I think I follow that. I guess I have a question. How is our extension stated? It's just stated in a gross number, right? We would just say, it would be kind of unknown to anybody as to whether we were taking 0% or 5% or the library. It's just, it's a single number we're giving.
We ask the county, give us this number.
We ask for a specific number and then tie it to
They
budget
back into
dollars.
the EAV, the rate is resultant of the, yeah.
And they back it into those various
see.
departments.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But if they did compare their tax bill from one year to the other, they would see that the rate, the calculated for those dollars would be the same or pretty similar, barring new construction, that would still change it a little bit.
New construction is here. Is that an assumed number? I guess it's a
That's
very
the county's
precise.
most recent estimate that was provided.
I see. Which is down from the last couple of years, I think. I was somewhat surprised by that, to see that it was 1.1 in prior years. Recent memory had been 2s and 3s.
So that number could change. This is as of September. You
I
know,
see.
it could change when the final extension comes through.
And their year is the calendar year, 2022? Okay.
That's a good point that you talked about. We've had conversations with the county about when the EAV is, when is that line drawn? Okay, what's the official EAV? And it's dynamic.
It is.
I mean, if you call them today and then call them the next day, the EAV is different, right? It's always moving because people are challenging it, things are getting reassessed. It's always getting reshuffled.
Right, there's more exemptions filed or, yeah.
And there's a count, they have a loss and cost, they adjust for that. When you ask for their extension, right, that's when they say, okay, we'll guarantee you this number, and how we get into it's gonna vary on the day it's done.
Yeah, yeah. But we simply request a number. We don't
Correct.
request a library number and a village number. Because that's a long-winded way of asking that question.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything other than 5% shows net revenue change, a negative net revenue change
To the general fund, yes.
to the general fund because of the increased
Pension
amount of
fund.
the pension contribution. Yeah. And that 1.095, 1,095,000 that's shown here, is that also an estimate, or is that more or less certain at this point?
A number that was actuarially calculated. It's in the draft report, and it should not change.
Okay.
And Bettina, how often, between this point and when the Board of Trustees needs to approve this increase, how much does your budget numbers that build up to that 5% change historically? Or is it kind of, what you have now is kind of,
It usually stays.
and Drew, just from a process standpoint, what we, if any, we will give guidance today, but if new information comes in between now and the board meeting where we ratify this, then we have the right to change that.
That's right. And yeah, tonight's goal is to recommend an estimate to the village board that would be considered at the next village board meeting. And then there will be 2 meetings, the second meeting in November and the first meeting in December, when the board will consider the levy. And obviously the finance committee can meet as many times, as long as you want to meet between that point and that point.
Yeah.
If you want to change your recommendation, but typically what happens before the next village board meeting, so the second meeting in November, you guys would come together, have a conversation and talk about the levy and how much do you want to vary from your estimate. But generally I think the village has been conservative historically in estimating high, and then if they decide to come down low, they will do that.
I would have a question for you following on the points Barb made earlier on. So what Barb was saying was that contractors, service providers will basically raise their rates on us going forward. So my question would be, do we have as part of the contracts, multiple contracts we establish with vendors for SNVC, do they have a clause of CPI with us where they could, if the CPI was to raise a few percent during that year, they could actually raise their contract by a few percent, or this is as we establish new contract, the price will be higher?
So I could speak to for example, the computer, BSNA contract that we have for software. It's 3% or CPI, whichever is lower. So I see that language in a lot of contracts, so
Yeah, so for like the Villages franchise with Groot, the big, it's over $500,000, that there is a ceiling and a floor on that in terms of how high it can swing up and how high it'll swing down.
But do they have a
3%.
clause?
Yeah.
Do they have a clause that says, guys, we'll raise it by 3% because that's in our contract and you agree to that already, so we're
Yes.
done?
Yes is the answer. But I would say the biggest swings that the village sees, and it's any of its budget and financial activity is within the capital, right? The idea that the village is, that is the most discretionary part of this budget for the village. And that swing, and I would say certainly in the last few years, the unpredictableness of the market has been very difficult. And the village has hit the pause on some button, hit the pause button on certain projects, but others, there was comfort to move forward. But, our size doesn't help in that, in those circumstances, because we don't have a lot of really big projects to have a large number of vendors. And so it makes projects, we're subject to the, market conditions that are really fluctuating.
And so what we're saying also is we're also subject to what we have agreed on in the past, including raises that are in accordance to CPI, for example. So in effect, we're pretty much forced to raise our percentage in order to keep up with our own contracts. That would be my point.
And do we have a surplus within the general fund right now that would carry from year to year?
So we have a surplus, but a lot of that's dedicated in the 10-year capital plan moving
Yeah.
forward to what we've discussed and planned, an
Yeah.
intentional surplus that's been there to
Yeah.
make up for things that were pushed during COVID and move forward in capital.
So yeah, the good news, bad news, we've gotten better about long-term planning.
Right.
But as we get, it gets tighter, there's less
Right.
flexibility.
So, yeah, part of that came with the creation of the capital fund, and a lot of those surpluses in general get moved to the capital fund to offset the project costs there.
I'm quickly developing my new favorite slide is that one that talks about the village's required investment in certain assets and where the village fits in terms of how much we're investing in the water infrastructure, the road program, transportation network, all those, and how the commitment that's necessary to those and that sticking to a plan may include raising property taxes now and then.
Chair Ankerman, are you ready for us to kind of speak our thoughts on this?
I am. I've done a lot of listening and I have my own opinions, and I would like to see, we've been given kind of this estimated impact on homeowners should we choose, no change or up to 5%. So kind of just, that's the big picture of what is the impact to individuals, and these other discussions are kind of what is the impact to the village. And now that we've had a chance to kind of look at that, look at the impact to the homeowners, look at the impact to the village, what are your thoughts on the levers that we can pull as far as CPI?
I'll offer for you to go first or for me?
You go
Your
ahead.
choice.
Go ahead.
You want me to go first? Okay. I'm going to recommend the full 5% increase relative to CPI. It is not lost on me that there are residents who certainly are financially strapped right now and are sensitive, and where the stock market has taken a beating, as former trustee Kate had warned us of. So there is a great sensitivity that even $55 is an impact on our residents. But I think for the health of the community and our services and our capital plans, it would be incumbent on us to, at this point, in the absence of any new information between now and the trustee vote, to recommend 5%.
Thank you, Member Rappin. Member Ryder?
That's consistent with my thinking. I'd be somewhat interested to hear more about which contracts we have that are tied to CPI, as opposed to 3% or some set percentage. I think you mentioned one that was CPI or 3%, whichever is lower. So I'm not completely certain how much impact those set contracts will have. What I am certain about are the capital costs that we have seen those costs go up. We as individuals, we as the city, the village have seen those costs go up far in excess of 5%. And so I'm inclined to go ahead and recommend at this point anyway, the 5% CPI. I guess I'd be interested in additional information about the contracts that we have that are tied to CPI, that if there are those. If the prevailing contracts are more akin to what Bettina was referencing, then that could influence me downward. But I think the capital expenses are still going to be pushing us up toward that 5%. So I'm comfortable with, at this time, taking the full CPI as the recommendation.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with both of you, and the additional piece of information that to me is just kind of the linchpin is the change in what's being asked for funding for the police pension. And this is actuarially calculated, not something that we can ignore. And just the change in what that requires from last year, that will mean that funding, if we don't take the 5%, again, is going to be taken away from other general fund activities just to keep everything even. So I am in agreement. So I don't think we need to belabor the discussion at this point. I think the purpose of looking at these estimates is to see, are we kind of aligned? Do we have direction? And since I don't see anything other than agreement, I think we've got enough to kind of recommend to staff what we need to do. Is that correct?
Fair enough.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay.
Be great if we had a motion, a full official recommendation.
Okay. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
And the motion, do you need it spelled out, or do we need to?
I got it.
Okay. Thank you so much. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you.
Great.
To the next business discussion item being taken out of order.
Madam Chairwoman, if I may,
Yes.
if it'd be all right, with the hopes of having our guests join us who are still not here. If it'd be all right, I can do a quick staff update. It's actually pretty exciting
Let's do it.
for a change of pace.
Let's do it.
So the village has been working with the Stormwater Management Commission of Lake County. If you recall, the village board authorized an intergovernmental agreement with the SMC to fund the phase 1 study of the deep tunnel project from the viaduct up Sheridan Road, east down North Avenue out to Lake Michigan. So the village has locked into that. We're at 16%, which I think is just under $90,000, our cost participation with that. The balance of that is being paid by the SMC. The SMC has recently asked the village if we'd be interested in another $2.7 million, which I did say yes to.
Well done.
Your job is safe.
Yeah, he was with me. So, but it was, this is interesting. So what happens is the reason why the village is doing the phase 1 from A to Z on that entire stretch of the project, because we didn't know we were going to get the money from. And if we were chasing federal dollars, we would have to complete phase 1. But now we think we'll be able actually to shrink that project scope because SMC is willing to actually go to phase 2 and fund construction of the deep tunnel working from the lake, because you have to work backwards now, right? You have to work from the lake west. So they're willing to fund it, phase 2, including construction up to Maple.
Wow.
And that's new news?
That's new news.
Okay.
They came in our meetings, if you remember, they said that they would be entertaining to go into phase 2, but not to this degree. Now, so they were sent documents. I said, I'm interested in asking the village board to commit to this, and so I signed that. So at some point, they don't have the money yet from the feds, so they were like, we're promising to promise. So it'll come back to you at some point in a resolution looking for an intergovernmental agreement.
Timeline for them?
To get the money. All this has to be spent by 2025. So what happens, yes, Jeff, are you there? Oh. Oh, no, it was Jeff texting, sorry. We looked like a very attractive partner, so we may get more money than this initial pot of money. So there may be more, like the county could end up going like, here's a total of 7 million. Because they're looking, don't forget, they have to administer all this federal dollars, and so they want
Yeah.
project partners that are prepared and that are ready to go. And they have been keenly aware of this project for a long time. The harder to dance partner to get nailed down is the state. We're trying to, it was our original goal to get the state to say, we agree with you, the Village of Lake Bluff, that this is the best alternative and we're gonna help fund this and do these things. Well, the state is reluctant to commit. And so, but that doesn't stop them from trying to partner with us.
I'm pretty sure we can make a case for getting more money, so
Yeah.
anything we can get.
Yeah, so it's good news that we're talking about actual construction, right? And so if this works and the village can get all this to happen by that date, and the village can finish its conversation about the stormwater utility, well, now the section of the phase one and that project is smaller, more attractive because it's less costly. And so presumably the state or even the feds think that's more of an attractive project, right? So, but we can keep, I mean, the county has been a great partner. And so, and even better news is that 16% cost participation goes down to 11%. So it's getting cheaper and cheaper money. So it's good news, I think, so.
Well, I think those long-term conversations and efforts on behalf of the village, Drew and Regis, we appreciate you just continuing to advocate for the village and pursue those dollars. And being prepared is part of, what's gotten us where we are. We have a, abundance of wealth in terms of, just,
Studies, models, yeah.
yeah. Well, and just, you've been around the block, so you know how this works. You kind of need to have something to start something, and you put us in a great position to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, and we're not done with conversations, as you say. We will hunt more dollars. We have right now $400,000 coming from the federal government. We need more, simply enough, and we haven't had that conversation with a state.
Was it 700?
750, okay,
Yes,
sorry.
750.
And we have not had that conversation with the state to try to fund a portion, for example, if somebody is listening to us, from the viaduct to North Avenue, simply enough.
Yeah, I think Regis's previous conversations with our federal representatives that we thought we were going to get more than $750,000, but still appreciative nonetheless.
We are absolutely appreciative. We would love to have more conversations.
So
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Did the HPC get a direction as far as when they might show up, or?
they both said 6, and it's after. So let's go get started if you want to.
Well, sure. Let's go ahead and do it. It's what happens if you're late to the party. The party starts.
I mean, if you want to hit the pause button, I can call real quick.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, one sec.
Can do it if you want.
I've got Kraus. Okay, thank you. Divide and conquer.
Just come up here. Do you want me to make
Yeah.
sure there's nobody else?
Well, make sure they're not down.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
I meant make
God,
sure
green
they're not-
goddess.
They don't know.
I should have looked. Straight up salad. There'll be extra. It's true. We'll never take it. How's everything going? How's
Is what's the leading do for Halloween? She doesn't. Her mind every 3 days. I think we use 80s exercise. That's fine. What about your zombie soccer player first off? And then Scarlett's Ghostbusters with her friends.
Did you do the ghost walk?
It's like
We went to,
a little. I know. It's just a lot.
we went to St. Louis this weekend.
It's so. It's
Parents
cute, I guess.
for sophomore, yeah.
It's funny how.
Did you?
Did you get good weather?
Yeah, it was gorgeous. And Jude, I like how Jude's like knows what he wants and doesn't care.
He was on
I gotta brighten that up.
he was on the
On his way?
Everyone wants to do this, and like, but I don't want to.
Drew, what
Yes,
part
ma'am.
did you play in the Ghost
Why
Walk?
don't you still do the thing you want?
Smallpox victim.
Oh, you look really in distress in this picture.
Who was your partner in crime?
My wife?
Yeah, who was your wife?
It's like breaks my heart. She's like, sweet. I know.
Duffy on Prospect. See?
Ours did?
Is that what's throwing up on your wife? Yes.
Those
were
well,
scabs.
that was
Those
pretty
were
much you
scabs.
the entire time.
Oh, yes.
I'll brighten that one up a little bit. But.
The Academy has reached out multiple times.
Charlie, probably.
Charlie.
They're always told me to cease and desist.
Saturday, Sunday was nice.
Steve?
Gorgeous weather for it.
Yeah, it was a nice Lake Bluff weekend for sure.
I grabbed the folder tonight to come here. I grabbed the folder tonight I used during the meeting, but so I made another grab tonight.
So, Regis, can you give away any secrets at all about how that head was in there?
No,
What happened?
The segment that Regis was in, which was the first skit,
happening?
there was some sort of an apparatus, and then there was just a head sticking out
A
of
lot
it.
more information.
And for the life of us, we cannot figure out.
Okay.
There must have been mirrors.
I grew up in with
All right,
physics.
sorry.
Physics.
Just to repeat.
Physics.
So these are hot mics. So anyway, we're fine.
You did
So
not really have small.
I can't get hold of Steve, but you said Paul's on his way.
Paul's on his way.
Okay, so that's the status.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anything we can talk about without Paul in the room, or?
I think we'll get started.
Chair Anchorman, can we get started?
I'm all for that. Okay. Drew, do you want to kind of go over the memorandum, or do you want me to just kind of give a little summary, or? I mean, the memorandum is, pretty comprehensive. And I'm trying to think about, specifically what's new, compared to the last, meeting.
Yep.
Do you want to do this, or do you want me to?
Well, I think, yeah, I can highlight what's new.
Yes.
And I'm just double checking to see if Steve was trying to participate electronically. He was not. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so what's new in terms is the draft ordinance, which was
Right.
requested at the last meeting. And also, as part of drafting this document, it was thought that we can go and roll in the senior citizen tax rebate program that's already on the books. It was a policy adopted by the village, but not an ordinance, so this would codify that concurrently. And then the new information was Hinsdale's, the village of Hinsdale's, central western suburb in Cook County, that had recently adopted regulations that are not too unlike Lake Bluff's, which was interesting, and I don't know if you know that community's a lovely place. Beautiful homes and really nice downtown, very attractive area. So I thought that was interesting information to share as well. I wanted, I guess, highlight a couple of things that staff has talked about related to the last conversation. Just to be clear, so there was conversations early on about should the village earmark funds from certain activities to fund other preservation programs, and then the other one I wanted to mention was the idea about the property tax rebate. So first, earmarking or designating funds. So Bettina and I went back and looked and had a conversation about this. There is no history of the village ever doing this in terms of earmarking. I think the village, even with home sales tax and other programs, vehicle sticker, you name it, the village has never earmarked any revenue stream, tied it to or permanently tethered it to a certain activity or program. That is presumably to maximize flexibility and also something else not to administer, right? The idea of tracking those monies and following the monies becomes another activity. So, so Bettina, want to make sure I said that. But
So did Barbara.
So, but the idea is, I just want to make that clear that the village has no past practice in doing that. As far as the property tax rebate, this was interesting too. So historically, in terms of economic incentives, when you think about the village, what the village has done to change behaviors, the village has done things to attract auto dealerships and other high sales tax generating like Target to do sales tax sharing agreements. And as an example for the Target agreement, the village did that, setting the baseline at a level which exceeded the highest sales tax ever generated from the previous property occupant, which was a car dealership. And so the village said, you know, when it did a sales tax deal, it said the first 200,000 or 250,000 will always be the village's coming out of that project. So the village was already better off than it ever was before. And then it gave the next 250 to Target, and then the village and Target shares whatever happens over that 50-50. That's one incentive. The village has never done a TIF, and the village has never rebated property tax. And there are a lot of other economic tools available to the village. You can do business districts, you can do all types of activities to help fund activities, but again, to further other policies, the village has never done that for historic preservation or otherwise. So I just want to make that is the village has reduced fees in numerous ways. You know, you have policies you've adopted that talked about how the village reduces fees for certain types of businesses or non-for-profits here in the community. But this, I just wanted to put that out there. That's something the village has never done before either. Doesn't mean that you can't. You certainly are legally able to do so. It's something that hasn't been done. It's something that I think should be treated as such. You know, something that of that magnitude. That when you're doing that it's especially certainly in light of the property tax conversation you just had, right? So anyway, so I think that's what's new and what at least staff has talked about since the Finance Committee had its last conversation.
Drew, do you mind summarizing what we learned from Hinsdale?
Yeah, there's a nice little chart that shows that Hinsdale has implemented a series of incentive programs that are, Mr. Bergman. As far as the fee waiver, so Hinsdale is waiving all zoning, historic preservation, and building permit fees. That's one of the things that I don't think was discussed at the HPC level was the idea of zoning. The village did, you know, we've already talked about this, the village has recommended and the zoning board took up at its last meeting, amending its standards for considering variations to reflect favorably to preservation. Another thing that Hinsdale did is they kind of developed a fast track process to review permitting for its preservation projects. You know, the villages, we outsource plan review largely here, and we're quick anyway. I mean, so it's not a big issue. We didn't view that as a big benefit. Interesting, the Hinsdale is talking about a property tax rebate. I can't say that they've done that before, or, you know, I don't know other incentives they offer, but they're looking at which was briefly talked about, was a minimum investment, right? They're not saying, hey, you price your water here, you're gonna qualify. They're saying you gotta spend at least $50,000 and it's for a 5-year term. What's been talked about here is an 8-year, which you guys spoke about, it's included in the draft ordinance, is that 8-year local rebate capped at $2,000. They also have a grant program to help invest. That's not been discussed. They did have some different alternative bulk regulations that it's part of an overlay district there, so they have, there's not a bonus for floor area, which the village has been talking about, which is significant, but they do give other bulk breaks. And that's really kind of an overview. And Chair Inkeman, Mr. Bergman, the chair of the HBC, is now present.
Wonderful.
No, it's okay.
No problem.
You're better than your predecessor who couldn't make it, so,
Oh, shoot.
yeah. So that's the updates.
That's the new information, and also new is an opportunity to look at what the draft ordinance could look like.
Yep.
And I had a number of technical questions. I don't know if that's something that we want to talk about or not. So the idea of a protected or certified feature, some of the language.
Smallpox hangover.
Drew, did you want to address the question regarding the protected or certified feature comment?
Well, if it's all right with you, I think some of those detailed or more questions for the attorney who's not present.
Okay.
Some of those, maybe, yeah, that's probably the best, because a lot of I think you were right on your adjustments and suggested amendments
Okay.
to the document, but I wouldn't, yeah.
It's not, I know at this point, what we're looking at is something that would just kind of be a mock-up of what it could look like without all the details worked through. I understand.
Correct, yep.
So, but what was in the ordinance was of the packet that was submitted by the HPC there were 3 elements, A, B, and C, that they were asking for. A being the property tax rebate with a 50% rebate, limiting it to $2,000 per year up to 8 years. And then for current landmarks, asking for up to a 50% rebate, a limit of $2,000 for only 1 year only. That was included in the draft ordinance. And B, the building permit fee waiver, that was also included. And the reserve for demolition tax proceeds was not included in any of that. So in looking at the property tax component, I've been I think one of the elements that we discussed at length, and a number of people at the meeting last time had a number of opinions about the fairness aspect of including current landmarked homeowner properties. My position has been that the purpose of this ordinance would be to incentivize future behavior, and the rewarding of people who are currently landmarked with a rebate, whether it be modest or equal to what the other homeowners get, I did not support. So I guess that's one element that I would like to discuss further with the Finance Committee members now that they've had some time to look at a draft ordinance and perhaps, consider it. Has anyone changed their position or have other further thoughts to share?
I just offer that I'm interested to hear more about the approach that Hinsdale took, because that seems to me, at least on the brief information that we have here, to be agnostic as to when somebody decided to landmark their home and instead look at the investment in that home as the relevant criteria. That's appealing to me. Essentially, not only do you decide that you're going to encumber your home somehow in order to get this incentive, this tax rebate, but you've also taken the step of investing in that home. That's how this reads to me. And Barbara, that seemed to me a way to get to a level of fairness for those people who have done this without these incentives, and for those people who might do them because of the incentives. It would be not only having encumbered your home, but also invested in your home that might earn you the tax rebate. I know that that wasn't what was proposed by the HPC, and one position that I've taken and continue to feel strongly about is that we ought to take our cue from the experts here that have looked at this for a long period of time. But that was one aspect of the tax rebate that I thought was worth looking into, because I agree with you, Barbara, that it's a little bit of a mismatch between the incentive structure and then this thanks for being a good citizen payment that doesn't quite match. So maybe we could rectify, or we could reconcile that mismatch that I see anyway, by looking at this investment as a criteria rather than the date on which you decided to landmark your home. So I'm interested in knowing more about that. So thank you very much for getting the detail about Hinsdale. And now I want more. But assuming for a minute that we don't do something like that, I am still in favor of some form of tax rebate. The other thing that I noted this time around was it does require the homeowner to make an application. It's not going to be an automatic, here's your $2,000 or your $1,500 or here's your amount. But instead you have to, file your paperwork each year in order to get the rebate. So that takes some additional thought and I think care on behalf of the homeowner. So assuming that there isn't something that we might pursue like Hinsdale appears to have done, and we are looking at what was originally proposed, I am still in favor of what was originally proposed by the HPC.
Drew, do you believe that in reading what Hinsdale has done, that this would apply for homes that have made these improvements in the past?
Retrospect, yeah, I don't know the answer to that, actually.
Yeah, because I didn't.
Glenn
I
is
didn't
trying to
read
find the
that.
answer to that right now, so.
Okay, because I didn't read that into it. It
Yeah.
didn't, it never occurred to me.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to see if that's what they were indeed doing.
Two things they might have done in the past. One, they might have made the improvements in the past, which I think is one question. I wasn't as focused on that. Instead, I was thinking of when they landmarked their home. That's the thing that always feels just a little bit arbitrary to me on this tax rebate thing, as to whether or not they did it before the statute or after the ordinance or after the ordinance. The way I was thinking of this, Barbara, was it wouldn't matter when you landmarked your home. What would matter is if you decided to invest in your home. Whether that second thing, the investment, looks backwards or forwards, I'm less focused on. It seems to me it might still be an appropriate policy to say, no matter when you landmarked your home, the investment is what we're incentivizing. It's less so the tax or the encumbrance of the home as a landmark, and more so the investment that we're asking you to make to keep your home relevant and continue investing in it.
And so just for clarification's sake, was your first question a clarification about did the property owner seeking the property tax rebate,
Yes.
would they have to been the parties that made the investment, or could they have transferred the property? Was that where you were going with that?
No, no, all of these are very good questions. I was being
okay.
much more simple than that.
Okay, I started thinking about that, yeah.
So I was thinking, it feels odd to me the way it's currently proposed, that people who waited around and finally landmarked their home are entitled to a tax rebate, and those who have done it earlier, for whatever reason, are not. That's always been puzzling to me. And maybe we're focused on the wrong trigger. Maybe what we ought to focus on is not when you landmark the home, but when you invested in the home. That's what earns you the tax rebate, the investment. So,
But how, so I'm trying to logic that out. So then if I already invested in the home,
Yeah.
let's say it was $100,000 and it was 5 years ago.
yeah,
I'm just crafting a scenario. So I'm
Yeah.
homeowner and I put 100,000, I, did some kitchen updates and a bathroom, and it was
Yeah.
100,000. And now this ordinance passes. As a village, how far
back. Yeah.
back do we go? Because it could be, oh, this was 10 years ago. This
Yeah.
was, so that starts, and again, I'm trying to look at this as, why are we doing this ordinance? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yep.
We're trying to what we've done is we've gotten some low-hanging fruit in terms of participation in this landmarking process for people who have pride in their homes, they love history, they all have their own reasons, and they've landmarked their homes. And then there's an equal number or even more of homes that, they're architectural gems, they represent significant things in our history. We would love to have those landmarked, but we just can't move the needle. And we now have to incentivize them to do that. So if we did nothing, it appears that these homes just plain would not be landmarked, because the low-hanging fruit has been gathered. These are higher fruit. So we're saying, we're not going to, have the stick approach. We're going to have a carrot. And the carrot is some type of incentive that is meaningful enough to change behavior. And so the two methods for doing that would be a property tax rebate or a building permit fee waiver. And we talked about how a building permit fee waiver would definitely make the people who are about to do some big project want to landmark their home, because that could be a big difference. For people who are not necessarily going to improve their home, they bought it in an improved condition, they love it just the way it is, it's okay if it's just the way it is. That would give an incentive for those people to move off the needle, to decide, okay, it's worth this rebate.
Chair and Chairman, I think you made a fine distinction that I think was the underpinning to that discussion. That is, our first concern is to provide the tiny bit of incentive that is going to help people considering improving on that house or keeping that house or not replacing it with a block that will be built in 6 months from now. The point is to help to push slightly the needle, or to push the needle enough, I should say, so I cannot qualify that, for people to say, no, it makes complete sense from a financial standpoint to improve on this house that has made history in Lake Bluff. And so to that extent, the fact that we have a timing issue such as they started investing 10 years ago, or they are going to invest next, and they should take credit of what we are putting together, is irrelevant. As no, we want to help people, so we should not put any blocks or any hindrance for people to take a credit that might help us keep that house in Lake Bluff. No, we should put a limit to how much we give, absolutely, as I see in the memo. But the point is, no, we want to push the needle, and we should not be too restricted to how we push that needle. And I think
I
you
guess when you say too restrictive, I think we need to have a program that makes sense. And when you say restrictive, meaning what, right?
So I can be more specific on that. The document says a one-year rebate of 2,000 for existing landmark. We say a reduction on the building permits. Those are the limits I'm speaking about. Restrictive, that means that, well, if you started investing maybe more than 2 years ago, we shouldn't do anything for you. This type of restriction, that is, no, we want to help you. We want to help you restore that house and continue restoring that house in the future and loving that house in the future and trying to make sure that you will not come to a decision at some point that says, this is hopeless, we don't want to do that anymore, let's get a new house in that same location. That is the point.
I think we all agree that that is the point. And the question is how to administer it that we do not create a feeling of inequity, and how do we do it in which, whatever money that we rebate is money that all the other taxpayers will feel the effect of. And so what is our comfort level for saying, in the big picture, this is how much money we want to dedicate to such a thing? And that's kind of where we were at the end of the last discussion, because, how many would participate in this? And, if we gave current landmarks this rebate, that would be a $26,000 hit straight away. For new landmarks, there's, 30 some houses. What if we got even 10% of them, to participate in 1 year? I mean, that would be 3 houses perhaps. And then the most that they would receive is $2,000. So there's another $6,000. And then every year that would continue, that $6,000 would continue then for 8 years. So even if you get just 3 houses to participate, that's 8 years of worst case scenario, most expensive case scenario. That's $48,000 that the village will be foregoing in property taxes over the next 8 years, and that's just taking.
Yes, but what you're basically doing is putting a price on intangible. That is, people are buying a house in Lake Bluff because there are cool houses next door. And that is what we're buying. And that intangible is basically the price difference buying an average house to buying a house that is in a community that justifies buying that house for a higher price. And we might lose $26,000, but we might gain another $100,000 in increased sales real estate taxes, for example. Can we quantify that?
I'm sorry, how does paying $26,000 to existing homes potentially increase future real estate tax?
Because we raise the value to the entire stock because we have houses that are of better quality or better historical quality.
Okay, but those folks that the 13 homes, they're already in that program, so those homes are going to be there, and we're going to incentivize them through permit fees to continue to invest, permit fee waivers to continue to invest in those.
Okay.
I'm just trying to my point of view, I'll let you play it out. Go ahead.
No, the thing I'm trying to say is we're trying to value tangible, a tangible amount we will dedicate to these houses, or a lack of revenue, a tangible lack of revenue, as opposed to, or in exchange for an intangible appreciation to our community. How do we quantify that?
And I agree that what we're doing is taking something tangible, which is property tax. And that was my effort to kind of quantify what it is that we're doing, right? And so what is this going to look like if we adopted it? So out of the gate, we would spend $26,000 for the people who currently have landmark homes. In addition, we would, let's say, gather 3 more homes to be added to the list of landmarked homes. Those 3 houses, let's say they each get their $2,000 rebate. That would be $6,000 over the next 8 years. That's $48,000. The purpose of me bringing that up was just to say, let's say what the cost is going to be to the village and say, yes, that makes sense. It is an intangible that we're gaining. It's an intangible of trying to keep the village as it is. And if paying that makes it actually happen, then we've achieved our goal. We just have to decide, is it worth that much money? That's part of the equation. And secondly, we need to say, will it affect the change that we're looking for? We could spend that money and have nobody join the landmark program, or that would not be true. We would only spend that money if people had increased participation in landmark program.
So
But would it actually mean that there are fewer houses that are demolished? I don't know.
Paul, would you mind?
Chair Ankerman, Historic Preservation Chair, Mr. Bergman wants to make a comment.
That'd be great. We'd love to hear from you, Paul.
Great. I'm Paul Bergman, been recently appointed to the head of the HPC. I can't address your point directly, but what I can add is that where there are historic districts across the country, that there is a comparable district next to it, they're now able to divine that the increase in construction in National Historic Register districts creates a much higher rate of investment, which creates a much higher land valuation when it's compared to the district next door. One of the best examples of that comes out of Rockford, which is about 60 miles west of here. They have two areas down on their riverfront, both residential, one of which was landmarked, one of which was not. They essentially, there's a main street that sort of cuts through the old historic area. One side of that neighborhood was put into a national landmark district, and the neighborhood, I think just to the south of that, was not placed in a district. And so you have almost a perfect apples to apples comparison of building permit applications, remodeling work that's been done, property tax valuations, and the study that they've done, which is several years old now, but it covered a period of about 10 years of measuring value. And what they found was where you give landowners the incentive to rehabilitate their properties, that rehabilitation causes more rehabilitation, which causes greater investment in the communities and a much greater sense of place. And so over time, they're finding that there is actually a measurable economic impact in doing that. Now, we don't have two historic districts side by side, one national and one not national. So I'm not providing you with a perfect analogy, but the studies, the people in the National Historic Preservation business are starting to study this at a very minute level and are beginning to come up with a lot of rather significant data. And they're coming up with 6%, 10% increases across an entire National Historic Register district as compared to the control district. Well, if you increase the value of the properties by 6 or 10%, that's perceived as doing a pretty good thing.
It's no longer intangible.
And so that's happening across the country. Rockford is the nearest one, but there are other studies like that they're finding and beginning to evaluate in that way. So I can offer that over time there becomes an actual tangible, measurable increase in the value of the community. So
I think that's a wonderful illustration of why the option B, where we increase the building permit fee waiver, is the win-win that I think everyone can agree on.
Well, the other piece that comes with that is the property tax cap that goes with that. That's 8 years of property tax cap plus the 4-year build-out that comes with it. And that's a federal program that's administered
Right.
by the state. So there's a lot of other benefits that occur by landmarking a house.
Chair Ankerman, where you started this was A2 for current landmarks, 50% rebate. That's the question at hand?
I would like to address that, and
Then I'll offer my perspective on that. My sense is that is a rebate that is really goodwill towards people for having made the decision in the past to designate their home as a landmark. And I guess my opinion in being fiduciarily responsible to the village, those decisions were made under a certain set of circumstance at a certain time. And it is not my sense or my belief that offering a $2,000 rebate for somebody who made a decision, 7, 8, 10 years ago is something that we should be doing. Now, we should be continuing to urge those folks and incentivize those folks to invest in their homes, and that's where I think the building permit fee waiver comes into play. So I'm not an advocate for A2.
thank you. Trustee Ryder? Excuse me, Member Ryder? Member Trustee Ryder?
Yeah, as I said, I'd like to explore other alternatives for the tax rebate. And so as it stands, I tend to agree with what you're saying, you both are saying. As to A2, it does strike me as an unfortunate result, though, and so I am very curious to understand more about what has been done in Hinsdale, to trigger the tax rebate, not with the landmarking, but with the further investment in the landmarked property.
I think it's still considered as though you would get landmarked. I mean, that's still the carrot that they're looking to do, if I understand, but we can
Well,
look
they have
into
to be landmarked and invest, right?
Yes.
And does and what I'm suggesting is it may not matter when they chose to landmark. It may nonetheless matter when they chose to invest in the landmark property. In any event,
Want to learn more about the
I want to learn more about whether there's another way of going at this other than the one that's proposed. I hear what you're saying, both of you are saying about it not being required to, give a thank you gift for people who have already made this decision for independent reasons. But I am interested to know whether or not there is another way of getting to a rebate that feels more equitable for the people who are investing in their property.
So Drew, you'll be asking some more questions about the Hinsdale program to find out the nuance of timing?
Yes.
Okay. I think that additional information that we're looking for, Steve, Susan?
First of all, has it been passed or is it just proposed?
No. This is just a draft that we may then
No,
say we.
I mean Hinsdale. I'm sorry, Barbara. In Hinsdale, it's been approved?
Yes.
It's law? So I'm interested in knowing how they've cracked this nut, because they've clearly thought about how to execute on property tax rebates, and I'd like to know more about that. So, but by more, I mean, when must the landmark decision have been made? When must the investment have been made? Whether the investment has to be all in one project, or might it be several projects over the course of several years?
Maybe why 50,000? Yeah.
Why 50,000? Is that, might it be instead some percentage of the value of the home rather than a $50,000 number? There's probably
That
as soon
sounds
as,
like an Yeah, an ease of administration type thing, just
Yes.
getting over a certain
Right.
hurdle. But that's a very good question to ask.
So I
any
haven't
other-
given up on the tax rebate, A or 1 or 2, A1 or A2, but I do think there might be a more surgical approach here that we could all live with, I guess. I might all be happy to support.
Great. Steve, any additional information requested?
No, I think it was articulated very well by Trustee Ryder. And, for me, I do think learning more about Hinsdale, in particular for A1, to understand if there is an investment required, it's one thing to give a 50% rebate because somebody is willing to be landmarked, but we also want to incentivize investment in those homes. So I'd be curious if that's part of it.
Thank you. At this point in time, I think we have fully discussed the draft ordinance and the components. I think we've got some direction for staff. If there are no further items to discuss,
See,
B, did we discuss B?
I don't think,
I don't think we discussed
we
either.
did. That was our first discussion where we discussed the property tax levy.
yeah. No, Chair Anchorman, I think the question was, staff is looking for clarity on B and C, just to be crystal clear.
I'll offer, just for expediency, if you're open to it, Trustee Anchorman, Chair Anchorman.
Please, please.
On C, C does not make sense to me personally. I think that earmarking money is it just doesn't sound like a really prudent financial thing to do. I think if the HBC has a program that is well thought out that they'd like to do, that coming ad hoc to the trustee board to secure funds would be a better approach.
Thank
I'm
you.
worried there'd just be money sitting in an account.
I agree with that perspective on C. I do encourage such a program. I think it's useful, and they would likely not be turned down for lack of funding. But I'd be concerned that it would sit there and we'd be wondering what to do with it.
Right. Thank you. Just to drift back to B one more time, which is the building permit fee waiver. Presently, it's a 25% waiver for landmark properties, and the HPC recommended 100%. Is there any further discussion on the recommended 100%?
If we abandon A altogether, then I would absolutely say 100% is the way to go on B. Because those are two sides
Yeah.
to the coin. If instead A has a tax rebate offered over the course of 8 years after one invests, then something less than 100% waiver might make more sense. But I still think it ought to be a significant waiver. I do think it's, maybe flipping the percentages and having a 75% waiver and a 25% purchase is on the order of things. But if we abandon tax rebate altogether, I would probably just say 100% waiver on B.
So at this point in time, we'll just leave it as it is, and then we'll further flush out what A might look like for a property tax rebate, and then look at it more holistically at another future meeting.
I don't know, it sounded like Trustee Ryder felt even if A were to continue to exist, that she felt that B would, an increase between 50 and 100 would make sense, and that she would advocate for 100% if A were to have gone away. Is that?
That's exactly right.
Yes.
We've now said it 3 different ways, but that's exactly right.
And I would agree with that, so I would like to see B at this point have a range between 50 and 100%, for discussion purposes.
Yeah, it sounds like all this hinges on what else we find back from Hinsdale. So we'll try to give a deep dive and see what else they looked at when they came up with theirs, and then come back at the next meeting.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, if there are no other items for discussion, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before I do, Paul, was there anything else that you wanted to speak to? Just want to make sure that you came all this way and you.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm
No,
not
no.
there in person and.
No, no.
I have the subtlety and nuance of somebody who's very far away. And recovering from COVID.
We're
Okay.
glad you're recovering.
I would
Thank
make
you.
a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a
Second.
second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.